Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, June 23rd, 2019, and today we're going to be looking at the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination polling data and discuss whether or not Senator Elizabeth Warren can bump up into second place by the time the primary season comes around. So right now we're looking at the RCP average, which takes a combination of the most recent 7 polls and makes an overall average or spread for the total all 23 of the presidential candidates. Now we have Biden in the lead at 31.9%, which can be rounded up to 32%, followed by Bernie Sanders at 15% and Elizabeth Warren at 11.9%. The remaining other candidates are all in the single digits. Now, looking at this data, it is clear that Warren and Sanders are definitely in a competition for second place. Sanders pretty much overall has held on to second place since the beginning of the primary season, with Biden at the top. There was a point in time where Sanders was at 14.9%, which was his lowest dip, but now he's at 15%, not too far off where his lowest point was. But it's pretty interesting considering that both Sanders and Warren offer an progressive alternative to someone like Joe Biden, but both of which have different bases. Sanders is at 15%, Warren is at 11.9%, but Sanders pretty much has been hovering around 15% all the way up to a peak of 24%. But pretty much since the beginning of the campaign season, he was around 16-17%. And once Biden announced, his numbers definitely dipped, went back up to around 18%, and now are lying at 15%. But Warren is pretty interesting. She's pretty much gone up to the highest place for any second place candidate except for Senator Kamala Harris, which peaked at 12.3% back in February of 2019. But Warren is at 11.9% now. She was at one point, no, that was her highest point, but 11.9% is really, really good. If we're looking at a race with over 20 candidates, having 11.9% of the vote is pretty good for someone who wasn't doing too well early on in this campaign season. Sure, her name was always speculated in the 2020 Democratic nomination, pool, but she wasn't exactly polling too well. She pretty much has only done well recently, and if you look before, people like O'Rourke and Harrison at a time, even Buttigieg went above Elizabeth Warren. Buttigieg right now is about fourth place, tied with Kamala Harris, and then O'Rourke follows down at 3.6%, and the rest of the candidates are under 3%. I think that is also pretty interesting considering that many of these candidates at one time did peak nearing 10%, now of which are definitely below that little cutoff line for candidates that have a real shot at the nomination. Beto O'Rourke was actually at third place nationwide at one point. Now is down even further down than Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris, which is pretty interesting to me. Sanders, of course, in second place, but Warren and Sanders, they definitely are going to have, a little bit of trouble getting each other's base to come over. Both of them have pretty much around the same ideas for their 2020 campaign. Biden, on the other hand, is definitely more of a centrist, more Hillary Clinton type Democrat. Bernie Sanders, of course, being the Bernie Sanders type Democrat. There are many other progressive candidates in this race as well that are taking off, less than 1%, but less than 1% amongst 20 candidates definitely can skew the numbers. But Warren and Sanders both being there, if they combined forces, they would be at 27%, and even that wouldn't overcome Joe Biden. So right now, Joe Biden is definitely the clear favorite nationwide. Obviously, if you add in other candidates, they could necessarily overcome Joe Biden, but right now it looks like he's in the strongest lead right now. But Sanders definitely could dip down into third place. If we look at the most recent polls from Economist/YouGov and Monmouth, we look and we see Warren in second place. She's at 16% in the Economist poll, with Sanders at 12%, and then the Monmouth poll shows Warren at 15% and Sanders at 14%. That's not a good sign. If we're looking at the two most recent polls, there's definitely something changing amongst the American electorate, and it doesn't look necessarily in the favor of Bernie Sanders. Sure, he has his name well known because of what he did back in 2016, but that definitely is knocking down. Warren is also known nationwide. Biden is also known nationwide. Buttigieg is now known nationwide. Definitely Beto O'Rourke. Kamala Harris as well. A lot of these candidates had that name recognition that Bernie Sanders had early on in the campaign season, that a lot of people did pledge their support for him, but now are taking that back because they have found another candidate that does have a real shot at the nomination that they may want to support, such as Elizabeth Warren, a female candidate, someone like Hillary Clinton, but also a little bit more to the left, someone that can appeal to progressive voters, that the Democratic Party believes can appeal to the white working class. We will not forget about the Rust Belt. Candidates like that definitely do well amongst Democratic voters. Biden as well, the reason why he's doing so well right now is because a lot of people do believe that he can appeal to the white working class. He's from the state of Pennsylvania. There's a reason why he's deemed one of the most electable candidates running for president. Warren, on the other hand, in a lot of, I guess, the political YouTube atmosphere, a lot of people did not deem Warren as an electable candidate. A lot of people did not necessarily see her having a real shot at the nomination, myself included. Right now, I think that this is really good for her. It can last. It might not last. I can't predict the future. If I was to bet on it, I would say she would remain around in the same place that she is right now throughout the campaign season, and possibly could overcome Bernie Sanders at some point. But I do think that she's going to stay pretty steady in a third, fourth place, possibly second place, like I said. But Sanders and Biden is probably going to narrow down into a two-person race between the two. But there's definitely a real possibility that Warren does overcome Bernie Sanders. And when that happens, it's going to be very, very bad for Bernie Sanders. If that does happen, he's going to possibly recover, but he's going to need to recover to be taken seriously on the debate stages. He is a candidate that almost beat Hillary Clinton back in 2016. That's insane. I mean, she was the top candidate, as Joe Biden was, but Sanders always overcame her, being someone who was a nobody in the beginning of the 2016 Democratic primary. So I think that is pretty interesting when you're looking at that. But Bernie Sanders right now, he has a lot of progressive policies that may not necessarily be going well with what the Democratic Party is envisioning for 2020. They're looking for an electable candidate. A number of polls have been taken for the 2020 Democratic race that discuss whether or not the Democratic Party wants a candidate that appeals with their views or one that can beat Donald Trump. And pretty much it's an even split. Even though it is an even split, a lot of people that may be saying that they want a candidate that can work with their ideals may be voting for Joe Biden as well. Yes, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have a progressive solution, but the progressive part of the Democratic Party is definitely not the majority. We saw that in 2016, and we're seeing that now. Even if you take all the progressive candidates and all the centrist Democrats definitely outnumber the progressive candidates. And a number of those progressive candidates that are running are around 1%. I mean, if we look at Tulsi Gabbard, who isn't necessarily too progressive, but is well known amongst the progressive Democratic wing, especially Bernie Sanders, is at 0.6%. I mean, she announced that was a big deal for a while, and then nothing really came of it. If we look at a number of these other white working class Democrats like Amy Klobuchar, she's at 1%. Yes, that 1% could transfer over to someone like Bernie Sanders and knock him up to 16%, and that 0.6% from Gabbard can knock over to Bernie Sanders and push him up a little bit more. But it doesn't make that much of a difference. The Democratic Party definitely revolves around centrist Democrats, and it has for the past few elections. There may be a time in the next 10, 12 years where the Democratic Party could possibly have a sudden shift in favor of the progressive wing, but as of right now, centrist Democrats definitely take the cake in almost every single type of Democratic primary, including this national one. I do expect Biden to do very well when it comes down to it. There is a possibility where he could lose. The debates are coming up. The debates are actually in a couple of days. By the way, I will be live streaming both debates. It's about 10 candidates one, 10 candidates the other. They said Elizabeth Warren lucked out. I'm assuming she doesn't have any quote-unquote real competition in terms of the debate stage. But I believe Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are together on the same debate stage, which should come out with some interesting things. Right now, these are pretty much the last numbers that we will see before the upcoming debate in the following days that will actually have an impact on the race. But right now, Biden leads by 17 and 10% of the most recent polls. Not necessarily the best showing with him leading by 10%, but still a pretty good lead nationwide amongst 20 plus other candidates. But we will see if Warren's able to shine at the second debate stage, considering she's not going against Bernie Sanders. She definitely could bump up her numbers. If you look at 2016, the Republican primary had a number of candidates. After the, I believe, second or third debate, Carly Fiorina attacked Donald Trump, and overnight she became the second place candidate. It lasted for about a day or two. She went back down, but that is pretty interesting how debates can impact your overall numbers. So again, I do think that there's a real possibility Elizabeth Warren can overcome Bernie Sanders. That is a real possibility. It is also very likely that Bernie Sanders will reclaim that second place lead nationwide, but again, a lot can happen after these debates. I really think that they're going to have a lot of interesting information. A lot of policy stances are definitely going to be taken out of people, especially people like Pete Buttigieg, who haven't really said anything about the, how they stand on certain policies and pretty much have just been running on their name only or what they represent. But I do think that these debates are going to hold a lot of interesting information, especially when we're looking at this data now. So I guess this is probably going to be my last time covering 2020 Democratic presidential nomination data before the Democratic debates in the next 3 days, and then 4 days for the next debate, I believe June 26th and June 27th, if I'm not mistaken. And I, again, will be live streaming both of those. But I do think that this is going to possibly change maybe drastically, maybe not at all, but I do think that a lot of these numbers are going to change. I think a lot of these candidates down here are definitely going to be recognized for, their zinger type debate styles where they're able to get an attack at Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren that may bring over some of the supporters from Warren, Sanders, or Biden down to them and boost them up just a little bit, and it could look like a very large improvement for them. So that pretty much wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.